Hello everyone and welcome back to Dragalia Foundry, a fan channel where everything Dragalia Lost can be found. This video is an updated beginner's guide to Dragalia Lost, focused on helping you build up your teams to complete early game content and transition toward harder difficulty mid-game fights. The main purpose of this video is to get you prepared to take on limited time quests such as the Fire Emblem crossover event that is currently around at the time of recording. I know many players join Dragalia Lost during collaboration events, so I hope this video helps new players who are just getting started with the game get up to speed. The secondary purpose of this video is to provide a window into what Dragalia Lost looks like from a new player perspective today. Since Dragalia released in September 2018, a lot has changed with the game. There's now much more permanent content available, including additional story chapters, void battles, and an event compendium where you can replay past limited time special events. As a day one player, it's sometimes easy to forget how many complex systems a game like Dragalia has. And so, for this guide video, I decided to create a free-to-play alt as an experiment to see the game with fresh eyes. In 12 hours of play on a single day, I was able to raise my free-to-play alt to 19,000 might without relying on random summons, using just welfare adventurers and dragons and my prior knowledge of the game. With a few more hours, I'm certain 20,000 might was not very far off. Since I did skip through story scenes, and I'm already very familiar with Dragalia Lost, I roughly estimate that the path I took would take most new players roughly 1 to 2 weeks of play. While faster ascents are possible, I suggest pacing yourself to get the most out of Dragalia rather than rushing it down. It is cliche, but Dragalia Lost is a marathon and not a sprint. Still, the way Dragalia Lost works is that limited time special events happen every month, replete with limited time endeavors and rewards. If you want most or all of the sweet rewards on offer from the limited time events that are active whenever you start playing Dragalia, it is helpful to understand how to ramp up quickly and to differentiate between which quests are important and which quests matter less. This video will walk you through all of that based on my recent experience with my brand new free-to-play alt. To make this easier to follow, I've broken things up into 10 steps. These are key points where I felt I had a big decision to make, or I decided to tap into a new type of game mode. I'll also spend some time diving deep on areas where I tended to get stuck with my alt account to elaborate on how I was able to make progress. So, without further ado, let's begin. Step 1. Select your starter. The first important decision you'll have to make as a new Dragalia player is which of the 9 starter 5-star units you'd like to have join you as a guaranteed adventurer. At the time of recording, Flame, Wind, and Shadow units hold a substantial advantage for those who want to boost their might quickly due to the availability of powerful mid-game weapons called Chimera tech. Might is a heuristic system in Dragalia Lost that indicates the overall power of your team. It's not something to be taken too seriously, but it is a gatekeeper of harder difficulty content. You'll need to meet certain minimum might levels in order to unlock quests. Therefore, ramping up might quickly via your starter is one quick avenue to success. Several units among the starters also have access to something called mana spirals. These are upgrades that expand their mana circles, basically think of a skill tree, and allow you to enhance them substantially, but this isn't accessible until you've already played for a while. Chimera tech weapons are certainly more important from a new player standpoint than mana spirals, and much of this guide will walk you through how to access and craft them as early as possible. With the fate of water and light units uncertain at the time of recording, Hildegard, Julieta, Xander, and especially Xainfried are slightly less attractive options as starters. Xainfried is slightly lower simply because his mana spiral has already been released, and while good, it isn't strong enough for him to usurp the meta. The other water and light units at least have upside potential since their spirals have not been unveiled. In contrast with water and light adventurers, Flame, Shadow, and Wind units are very easy to scale up quickly. Hawk, Nefaria, and Ezolith have a guaranteed level of value in the current meta, and all already have solid mana spirals available. Mikoto and Maribel are good picks if you wish to hedge your bets. These adventurers can access Chimera tech weapons, making them excellent through the mid-game, but neither has had mana spirals revealed yet, and they aren't exactly late-game powerhouses right now. Ultimately, the free story characters are good enough that whichever starter character you pick, you'll be fine. Therefore, selecting your favorite is totally okay. I personally believe Hawk offers the most utility right now because he's both a powerful damage dealer and he offers some unique mechanics that give him a lot of flexibility in late game content. However, with many adventurers yet to get their mana spiral upgrade, it's quite possible any of those could catch up quickly when those upgrades are finally released. And if you're watching this in the future, Water and Light Chimera tech are planned for release eventually, so if you've crossed that point in time, consider your options for early power expanded considerably. For my free-to-play alt, I ultimately went with Maribel, since although she's not quite as strong as Hawk, I figured she'd be helpful in some early game content, and I was going for an element, in this case Wind, that had access to Chimera tech weapons. And that's pretty much it for picking your starter. Step 2. Complete tutorials and the early story. After you do your free 10-fold tutorial summon and pick your starter, you'll be prompted to build a team and start clearing quests from the main campaign. The game will suggest you use an optimize button to build a team, but this is generally a very bad idea. It's better to actually read what your gear does on the Teams tab and make your own choices about who to equip gear to. Besides a free 10-fold summon on your first day of play, you'll get additional 10-fold summons every day you log in for a while, so make sure to keep playing regularly. There are also other login bonuses and dailies you'll want to complete. The main campaign is designed as a tutorial for the broader game, particularly in the first several chapters. You should be able to clear through at least chapter 5 of the story with your starter 5-star unit plus all of the story characters relatively easily. If you are struggling, try substituting out whichever members of your team are weak to that particular chapter's element. Clearing chapters unlocks access to new game modes, upgrade options, and characters, so progressing through the story should be your first priority as a new player. In particular, some of the notable early milestones are unlocking the Halidom after Chapter 1 and unlocking co-op in Chapter 2. The Halidom is one of the most important systems in Dragalia Lost, so let's spend a moment on that. If you want to make continuous progress while playing Dragalia Lost, a very simple early rule to follow is the ABCs. Always be constructing something. Early on, it matters less what you build than it does that you're constantly pushing up the total facility level of your Halidom. You start with 2 Smithworms who can help you build facilities, and I'd suggest spending Wormite on 2 more of them. Whatever facilities you happen to have the materials to upgrade, go ahead and upgrade those. You just want to keep all of your Smithworms occupied at all times to the extent possible, and never spend Wormite or Hustle Hammers to hasten build times early on. Hustle Hammers should be saved for build times of 1 day or more, and Wormite should generally never be used to quicken builds. Doing this, going wide with your facility expansion, will make it so that you can level up your Halidom Castle sooner, thereby expanding the amount of available space, and more importantly, unlocking extra levels for your smithy. The smithy is a special facility unlocked in Chapter 2 that allows you to craft weapons. Weapons are one of the pillars of progression in Dragalia, most within the player's hands to control. As you level up your smithy, you'll be able to access increasingly powerful weapons via crafting. A smithy level of 5 is needed to craft the versatile mid-game Chimera tech weapons that I've alluded to earlier in this video, so this is the target you'll want to shoot for to put yourself in a good position to clear most limited time content. To reach a smithy level of 5, you'll need a Halidom level of 4, which requires a total facility level of 100. This means a combined level of 100 across all of your various facilities, and it's why leveling these up on cooldown and constantly keeping your Smithworms active is so valuable in the early part of the game. Another thing worth noting is that you'll unlock extra facilities as your overall player level increases. You'll gain access to elemental altars, more rupee mines, and eventually even more altars. The other thing that happens whenever your player level goes up is that you obtain 50 Wormite plus get a full refresh on stamina and gather wings. Early on, it's very hard to burn wings in co-op since, sadly, early game co-op lobbies tend to be largely empty. If you can at least try to keep your total wings at or below 87, then you'll be able to obtain a full refresh of 12 each time you level up, even though it'll be a while before you're properly below 12 wings to take advantage of their hourly refresh rate. Since the max player level is 200 and many day 1 players still haven't gotten there, myself included, I'd also suggest you keep Yuden somewhere on your team when possible because one of his passive abilities improves your player EXP intake. Step 3. Play Avenues, Elemental Ruins, and Dragon Trials. Of course, as you play through the campaign, there are plenty of other modes you'll unlock along the way. Some of the first few quests you get are Avenue to Power and Avenue to Fortune, Elemental Ruins, and Dragon Trials. These quests contain materials needed for leveling up your facilities, adventurers, dragons, and weapons. All 3 quests have daily bonuses, meaning the first 1 or 2 times you run these quests each day, you'll get some fixed extra rewards. Also, each quest has various difficulties, with the harder ones unlocking as you raise your maximum might. For your daily bonuses, I'd suggest always going for the hardest difficulty to get the best and most drops. Elemental ruins rotate daily, so you'll want to watch out for whichever elemental ruin has expert available and collect your daily bonus for that one. The Avenue and Elemental Ruins quests are perfectly fine to play on auto repeat in the early game if you ever find yourself stuck needing more orbs for mana circles or altars, rupees, or more level up materials. The beginner and standard difficulty avenues and ruins are good quests to clear out when you feel like taking a break from the main campaign, and you should be able to handle them around chapter 3 or so. Ruins are slightly harder because you'd ideally want multiple characters of the same element, but if you stuck with the story characters for the campaign, then you most likely have more of a rainbow team. Still, it won't be long before you can brute force even the expert level ruins, and likewise with avenues. Even if one of your characters dies, it's still worth completing the quest. You won't be deducted any benefits unless you started using revives after your whole team had died. And even then, you have so much stamina early on that you don't need to worry too much about that. It's just better to try clear. Dragalia is very friendly about failing and retrying quests. There's no cost or loss if you fail, so it never hurts to try or retry. And even if you die, you still get good rewards in co-op if your allies finish the fight. Dragon Trials are a much larger challenge, and this is one of the first big roadblocks I hit on my free-to-play alt. The easier difficulty Dragon Trials aren't too bad, but by the time you reach Expert and Master difficulty, you'll probably want a dedicated team of the opposite element. If you can get a clear on one Master Trial without using revives, you'll be able to use skip tickets on that quest, which allow you to collect the rewards without having to actually play it. Master Dragon Trials and later on Imperial Onslaught and Void Battles are relatively good sinks for skip tickets early on because these fights are hard to repeatedly solo until you have separate elemental teams or have a few mid-game Chimera tech weapons. Unfortunately, co-op lobbies for regular Dragon Trials are almost always empty, so you can't reliably count on co-op here, but if you're lucky, it could perhaps help you with your first master clear. Just getting a first clear in these modes on each difficulty is going to grant you some Wormite, plus elemental orbs and dragon scales that'll help level up your elemental altars and unlock your unit's mana circles. Mana circles are essentially linear skill trees that grant powered up stats, abilities, and skills to your adventurers and are an early way to boost might. Eventually, you'll want to bring your entire roster up to 21 mana nodes at a minimum to read all of their adventurer stories, since doing so grants Wormite, a valuable summoning resource. But in the short term, it's better to focus on a team of 4 or maybe 5 total units to build up their maximum might fast, since mana and other resources used for the mana circles are relatively scarce. As mentioned earlier, it's going to be easier for you at the time of recording if you make a max might team with Flame, Shadow, and Wind adventurers, because, for right now, the powerful Chimera tech weapons we're shooting for only exist in those elements. Step 4. Unlock the Imperial Onslaught and Void Battles. So, you've beaten the first 5 story chapters, you've unlocked and beaten the avenues, ruins, and a few dragon trials, with maybe the harder ones still yet to be conquered. At this point, you're probably ready to continue on with Chapter 6 and Chapter 7 of the main campaign in order to unlock some more game modes. Chapter 6 and 7 represent a decent-sized difficulty spike, so I'd suggest taking the time to look through your inventory and refocus your team to give yourself an easier time. Start equipping higher level gear you've gotten as drops up to this point, like 3-star weapons, especially if they have an element or a skill, and random worm prints. Spend crystals to level up your main team evenly. Try unlock 10 or 20 mana circles on them. Shadow and Flame are good against Chapter 6, while Wind and Light are good against Chapter 7, but frankly, using your strongest units works just as well. The EX side stories in Chapter 6 and 7 may be the first time you feel a real sense of pushback from the main campaign if you've been steadily upgrading your team along the way. These can be saved for later though, and you should prioritize finishing the main path in each chapter for now. Beating Chapter 6 unlocks the Imperial Onslaught. Just like Avenues, Ruins, and Dragon Trials, Onslaught is permanent content with daily bonuses attached. In the case of the Imperial Onslaught, known as IO, you want to get 2 clears in per day on the highest difficulty you're able to. Thankfully, Master IO is roughly the tipping point between which quests are hard to find co-op rooms for and which are not. Master IO isn't always super active, but it's usually possible to find a co-op room with a small wait, especially if double drops are running. Anything that costs costs roughly 25 stamina or more is usually something done in co-op. If you can't play Master IO right away due to your might, focus on the lower difficulties for the time being. IO is an excellent sink for your resources when you don't know what you should be doing with your wings or stamina. More so than Avenues, Ruins, and Dragon Trials, you're going to be playing a lot of IO to build and level up facilities called dojos, which you also unlock by beating Chapter 6 of the story. IO is also an important source of crafting materials for many types of weapons. Meteorite, granite, and iron ore are used to craft swords, blades, and axes. Fiend's eyes, horns, and claws are used to craft daggers, lances, and bows. And bewitching wings, ancient bird feathers, and bat wings are used for staffs and wands. The treasure trade in the shop section of the game lets you swap among these materials across rarities, and there's also quick access when you're spending materials in menus. Until all of your dojos are max level, you can really never go astray with this mode, but outright grinding it is better done during double or triple drop periods. It's also a relatively hard mode early, but it's not too bad to find stronger players in co-op. If someone has 6,000 to 7,000 or more might on a single unit, they can probably carry the quest, so your room should be just fine to clear if you simply focus on survival. Once you clear Master IO with all endeavors, you're able to skip ticket that quest in the future. Skip ticketing Avenue to Fortune and Power once each gets you a bunch more skip tickets, and using the surplus you get from doing so on Master IO is a great way to quickly accumulate useful materials. While IO is incredibly beneficial for long-term progress, it's not necessarily the fastest route to power when it comes to weapons. This is where Void Battles come into play, unlocked by beating Chapter 7 of the main campaign. Void Battles are split into easier quests that are always available, and harder ones that rotate in and out throughout the week. You should think of Void Battles as monthly content. In the shop, there's a treasure trade section dedicated to Void Battles that resets every month with high-value rewards. In it, you can trade Void Leaves dropped from all Void Battle quests for rare, helpful items. It's definitely worth trying to clear out all items from the Void Treasure Trade each month, and there's usually a dedicated Void week during the month with extra incentives to do so, like new Void Battles to play. That being said, when you first beat Chapter 7, your max might will probably be fairly low. The gate for the easiest Void foes is 9,000, and the gate for Master IO is 10,000, but plenty of harder Void quests will likely be out of reach. Easier Void battles like the Shroom, Hermit, Golem, Catoblepas, and Phantom Strikes are worth clearing once for Wormites off endeavors, but generally not worth farming right away until you have a reason to do so. These quests won't give you much of an immediate boost, but their drops are helpful down the road for defeating harder difficulty Void bosses. It's just not easy to navigate which quest is good for what when first starting the game, however, so don't worry about challenging these Void fights too much for right now. If anything, look on the crafting menu for weapons with Fury Penetrator and fight the Void enemies linked to those weapons like the Obsidian Golem, Amber Golem, Frost Hermit, and Scalding Shroom. These Fury Penetrator weapons aren't needed in the long run, but will make your life easier against Void Manticores, a stepping stone toward those coveted Chimera Tech weapons. You can also craft weapons from the early Void fights specialized in taking on the Void dragons like Poseidon and Jeanne d'Arc, but since those aren't directly on the path to Chimera Tech, we won't discuss those much for today. Void Manticores are the next step on our progression path, but these require 12,000 might to unlock. These are the first Void battles you'll really want to farm, and you should try do so when double drops are active for the best rates. Unlocking these will likely be one of the first times you have to proactively try boost your team's might in order to face new content. One way to do this is to just keep playing the main campaign. In doing so, you'll eventually unlock stat-enhancing augments that directly raise the might of your adventurers and their gear. Eventually, you'll want to play the rest of the campaign for new characters and goodies, but there's certainly not that same rush that's present for chapters 1 to 7. Instead, let's look at other ways you could boost your might. Step 5. Try the Mercurial Gauntlet and the Event Compendium. So, you've beaten through Chapter 7 and unlocked a lot of the core content in Dragalia Lost. Along the way, you may have noticed 2 modes sitting on the quest page and wondered what they're all about: the Mercurial Gauntlet and the Event Compendium. Both modes are beneficial as means of advancing your core squad up to 12,000 might in order to unlock the next relevant Void battles, Void Manticores. Let's start with talking about the Mercurial Gauntlet. The Mercurial Gauntlet is another mode that confers monthly rewards based on how many levels you've cleared across all elements combined to date. This mode consists consist of 1 or 2 minute battles against a stationary enemy and is more of a sandbag setting to test and push the DPS limits of your teams. Early on, you may not be able to go very far into the Mercurial Gauntlet, but even if you can clear through level 7 or 8 of each element, you'll get rewards that help boost your elemental altars and mana circles. Some key things to note are that you're not required to use a team all of the same element, and if you time a skill right when the boss enemy, Roy, claps his hands, you can iframe and prevent damage to your entire team. This changes later on as the difficulty scales up, but that tip alone removes the need for a healer and makes the earlier levels much easier. If you find yourself lacking elemental orbs or dragon scales early, Mercurial Gauntlet is well worth a look. You can always come back throughout the month as you progress to see how much further your team can reach. The event Compendium is a much deeper vein of content, and it's pretty much exactly what it sounds like. This feature is an archive of past events from Dragalia Lost, which you can go back and play to get valuable rewards. At the time of recording, the Compendium only contains facility events, but those are perfect for trying to boost your might. Facility events provide a stat boosting facility for your Halidom that you can level up by repeatedly playing the boss battle within the event. You may not be able to beat the challenge battles within each facility event right away, since you generally want a team of the preferred element for that, but just by farming the boss battles, which are much easier, you can build up a level 35 elemental facility from any of the past events in the Compendium. To grind out Compendium facilities efficiently, use their treasure trades to pick up some of the event worm prints and put a single copy on each of the characters in your team to boost your reward intake. Another tip is to not set the boss battle to auto-repeat, because after each battle you have the chance to unlock a harder difficulty EX quest that drops tons of materials needed for leveling up your facility. If you do auto-repeat, however, you'll only be able to trigger one EX quest for your whole auto-battle session. You may not be able to clear out the treasure trade or repeatedly clear the challenge battles in the Compendium right away, but having access to more facilities, even if you just bring them to level 15 or so, is a fast means of advancing your Halidom to a max facility level of 100 or even 200 while boosting your team's might. The Flame and Wind facilities are particularly useful as your ultimate early game plan is to work toward those Chimera Tech weapons, which cover these elements. Having said that, it's worth playing through and completing all of the event's Compendium content eventually. Besides the treasure trades and free facility in each event, you'll also want to accumulate 1 million points by playing challenge battles over time for extra loot. Step 6. Farm Void Manticores and Chimeras. This is where your journey to strengthen your teams in Dragalia Lost all starts to come together. You've cleared through at least chapter 7 of the story and played some side modes to advance your team to 12,000 might. Your Halidom constantly has new facilities in development and is actively progressing. At this point, you're ready to take on the Void Manticores and use those to take on the Void Chimeras. Void Manticores are a permanent fixture in Void battles, available at all times with an unlock requirement of 12,000 might, so let's start there. These boss enemies all use the Fury mechanic, which makes it so that normal weapons can't diminish their overdrive gauge and break them. While in the overdrive state, the Manticore's movements have less obvious tells, but with practice, they're still not too bad to dodge. The quests are hard enough that you'll want to aim for co-op on your first clears of these. Once you build single-player teams of the preferred element, you can probably solo them, however. Fortunately, Void Manticores are fairly active as far as public lobbies go, and a strong player can easily carry the fight quickly. You'll want to look out for whichever Void Manticores are on double drops to farm as efficiently as possible. Generally speaking, stronger players won't have any rush to do Void Manticores if they're not on double drops on that particular day of the week, so you'll have a much harder time and a longer grind because you may not find people in co-op. Ultimately, your goal here is to gather materials so that you can craft 5-star Flame, Wind, and Shadow Manticore weapons, since those are prerequisites for Chimera Tech weapons. The Light Manticore drops materials for Shadow weapons, the Water Manticore drops materials for Wind weapons, and the Flame Manticore drops materials for Flame weapons. Note that you should focus on crafting a Manticore weapon for whoever you actually plan to build Chimera Tech for in the short term. In my free-to-play run, this was Ronzel, Maribel, and Cleo, so I built a Wind Axe, a Wind Wand, and a Shadow Staff. Not counting your starter, if you beat Chapter 8, a good set of characters to build up would be Yuden, Ronzel, Cleo, and Alex. All 4 are of the proper elements to access Chimera Tech weapons, and Yuden, Cleo, and Ronzel have mana spirals available or announced. To speed up your crafting, you can also trade for steel bricks from the event Compendium and Void Battle treasure trades. These universal unbinding items let you unbind any 4-star weapon, meaning you can use these to get 4 unbinds on any 4-star elemental Manticore weapons you've crafted, and from there easily enhance them to 5-star elementals, for which the max unbound 4-star version is required. Once you have a 5-star elemental Manticore weapon for each of the characters on your strongest team, let's say Yuden, Ronzel, Cleo, and Alex, then you should have made the jump from 12,000 might up to 13,000. At 13,000 might, you unlock access to standard difficulty Void Chimera battles. You can use weapons from the Void Phantom Strikes to make Chimera battles easier, but these queues are also fairly populated during double drop periods, so it's probably fine to go into co-op for your first clears without any special weapons. Void Chimeras definitely aren't trivial when your DPS is low, however, and people who can generally prefer to play expert rather than standard for Void Chimeras, so this farm isn't going to be the easiest and you're less likely to get carried. Still, keep trying with Void Chimeras on normal difficulty and grab those phantom weapons if necessary. The Chimera Tech weapons you can craft by beating the Chimeras are well worth it. The standard difficulty Chimera will only drop crafting materials to make tier 1 Chimera Tech weapons, but even these weapons grant over 1000 strength when max unbound and equipped to an adventurer of the matching element. Chimeras, unlike Manticores, do rotate in and out throughout the week, so you'll want to make sure the Chimera you're interested in grinding is actually available on the day you're making your attempts. Your goal at this point is to make one max unbound tier 1 Chimera Tech weapon for each of your main team. Imagine it's Yuden, Ronzel, Cleo, and Alex or your starter. The Chimera Tech weapons represent such a large increase in might that by doing so, you'll quickly escalate your team from 13,000 might to 16,000, which is enough to challenge the expert difficulty versions of the Void Chimera battles. The expert versions are a much more stable place to farm than the standard ones because stronger players will regularly fill these co-op lobbies, plus you'll get access to an additional drop that lets you enhance your tier 1 max unbound Chimera Tech weapons into tier 2 Chimera Tech weapons. Even if you don't fully unbind the tier 2 weapons right away, having a copy of them with no unbinds is still an upgrade over the tier 1 version. With just 2 of these weapons on my team, I was able to reach 19,000 might in half a day of playtime. The Void Chimera are worth playing repeatedly even when thinking ahead toward the late game, because tier 2 Chimera weapons are prerequisites for the 6-star Agito weapons. For the time being, however, they're also just a fantastic way to ramp up toward 20,000 might, which is enough to unlock the hardest difficulties for most of the limited time event content. You also get augments from Chimera battles which you can use to directly power up units after you've cleared Chapter 9 of the campaign. In addition, the chance of getting Void Seeds from these fights is high, and there are lots of good uses for these within the Void Battle treasure trade, including special facilities and dragons. Even when you clear these out, Void Seeds can be used for mana spirals or exchanged for Void Leaves. The exchange rates from seeds to leaves and leaves to rupees are high enough that hard Void fights are typically recommended as the preferred method to grind money compared to Avenue to Fortune. Step 7. Gather resources from endeavors. At this point, you've got a relatively strong mid-game team with 19 or 20,000 might. This is about the point I reached with my free-to-play alt before stopping my play session. You're going to want to clear most of the content from whatever limited time event is currently active, but it's possible a few quests, like the harder difficulty Trials quest, still won't be unlocked until after your might hits 25,000 or perhaps more, depending on the event. You can certainly unbind your tier 2 Chimera weapons by farming and try and enhance your might that way. You can go back to the Mercurial Gauntlet or event Compendium, since your core team should now be strong enough to make lots of progress. You can probably go back and get deathless clears on any Dragon Trials, Imperial Onslaught, or early Void Battle maps you had previously skipped over. And you can clear the story on hard or begin it on very hard. You can also examine your characters, see what materials are needed to progress their mana circles, and focus on that as a means of further enhancing your might. At this point, there's really no wrong way to go about things, but one thing that helps when in doubt is to check out the Endeavors menu on the game's home screen. Endeavors are essentially tasks to complete that'll usually offer Wormite and other valuable goodies. Daily and limited endeavors aren't permanent, so you'll want to prioritize those. All quests in the game also have endeavors linked to your first deathless clears. Daily endeavors, daily bonuses on quests, and grand bounties in certain events events are the daily content in Dragalia Lost. Another thing you'll want to do daily is give your dragons all of the possible daily gifts in the Dragon's Roost to boost their bond, since this is yet another source of might and helpful materials. It's also wise to do a daily free item summon and check in with your alliance, or create an alliance, for goodies. For weekly content, you can collect Fafnir medals up to 50 per week and trade those for treasure. You can battle high dragons in the Agito Uprising, which are endgame fights we've yet to fully discuss. With high dragons, you can also help newer players get their first clears on standard and expert difficulty to collect weekly mentor bonuses. And if no raid event is currently active, you can collect astral pieces during the week by playing any type of quest, just like Fafnir medals. On weekends, you can then exchange astral pieces to play in astral raids, which are past raids that have returned for that weekend only. This mode also has its own treasure trade. For monthly content, Dragalia has the Mercurial Gauntlet that resets on the 15th mid-month, plus void battles for which the treasure trade resets on the 1st. Taken together, the daily, weekly, and monthly incentives means there's usually always something to do. When in doubt, try do the thing for which the rewards expire soonest. This usually means daily and limited endeavors, but when you finish, or when you know you'll finish those in time, you can also peruse normal endeavors for direction on what to do next. As you steadily clear content in the game and complete daily, limited, and normal endeavors, you're going to accumulate a lot of war might. Early on, I'd suggest saving this. It takes a while to get a sense for how best to use it, and there's not much need to expand beyond your free-to-play starting roster to make progress. Having said that, I know people love to summon, and summoning is a source of power. So that brings us to Step 8. Summon strategically and sparingly. Dragalia is unlike other gacha games in that many lower rarity characters are perfectly viable for endgame content, particularly those of a 4-star rarity or above. The story cast definitely contains some very solid units, and together with your starter, you probably have all the adventurers you need to clear all the content in the game if you choose to. This means that there's not a huge rush to summon if you don't want to. However, summoning is a fun part of Dragalia Lost, and it's a great way to experience its colorful cast of characters. When you begin playing, you get a week of free 10-fold summons, so be sure to log in daily to take advantage of it. Particularly early on, summoning is also a major source of power because summonable dragons tend to vastly outperform most of the welfare dragons you get for free. When it comes to dragons, you'll typically want to match them to the element of the character you're using them on to take advantage of their stat boosting abilities. Dragons from the summoning pool at a 4-star rarity or above, particularly those which boost strength in some fashion, are generally speaking going to vastly outperform the story dragons you get for free. Of note, Rock, Efreet, Vojanoi, Lindworm, and Juggernaut are 4-star dragons who, when max unbound, grant 45% strength. Even a single copy grants 30% strength, while the best dragons from the story still only provide a 20% boost when fully unbound. The summonable 5-star dragons are often even better than 4 stars, but it takes a while to fully unbind them, so 4 stars will suffice for a long time. Even when you get 5 stars, it's common for 4 stars to round out your team. Note that having access to gacha dragons could very easily push you up to the 25,000 might range from 20,000. Keep at least one copy of any dragons you obtain, even if they're 3 stars. Having them in your Dragon's Roost is worth it because you'll form a bond with them eventually, and maxing out their bond level gives you a precious item called a Sunlight Ore. 10 of these items lets you obtain a wildcard unbinding material for 5-star dragons called a Sunlight Stone. In general, higher rarity dragons are usually always worth keeping in the early and mid-game simply because of the power they can provide, and the extra bond rewards like the Sunlight Ore are a bonus. You can also use Moonlight Stones from the Void Battle and event treasure trades to unbind 4-star dragons without using duplicate copies. This is a quick way to boost your lead character. Save these Moonlight Stones for 4-star strength dragons in particular, like the ones mentioned earlier. When summoning, a good rule of thumb is to always go into a session with at least 12,000 Wormite. This amount is high enough that you'll be able to get a 5-star even if your luck is the worst possible. It's also better to start with any single vouchers you have in batches of 10 to increase your 5-star appearance rates before using 10-fold summons and vouchers. As another piece of advice, it's good to wait toward the end of a showcase to summon, because at that point you'll typically be able to see a preview of the next showcase and make a more informed decision about which of the two interests you more. Besides that, while you're obtaining free daily 10-folds, it's always good to wait wait those out. You might end up getting all the focus characters on the banner using just free summons, and if that happens, it's generally not worth it to commit extra resources. You're better off saving your Wormite and waiting for the next showcase, or saving up for what's called a Gala Dragalia, special showcases which occur monthly or bi-monthly, with a pool of stronger units and heightened appearance rates for 5-star adventurers and dragons. The last thing I'll say about summoning is that although Dragalia is extremely generous with its free-to-play currency, sniping particular focus units off a showcase still isn't cheap or easy in this game. On most showcases, you're looking at roughly 400 summons to give yourself a 9 in 10 chance to pull a particular 5-star focus adventurer. 4-star focuses are much easier to target, taking at most around 100 summons or so. The long and short of summoning is that if you really want a certain unit, saving up is definitely key. And well, that brings us to Step 9, finish time-sensitive content. At this point, you've done it all. The combination of some dragons from the summoning pool, plus your powerful Chimera tech weapons, should leave you with a team in the 20 to 25,000 mite range. If you wanted to make your Manticore and Chimera farming even easier, you could always summon before that to give yourself good dragons and focus on weapons after the fact. One way or another though, if you keep trying to craft Chimera tech weapons for a core team of adventurers, your might will climb. As previously mentioned, it's good to try and knock out daily and limited content as a priority when unsure of what to do in Dragalia Lost. By the time you've achieved this level of might, most of that is doable. You may struggle a bit with events that favor a light or water team since those elements don't yet have Chimera tech weapons at the time of recording. The Fire Emblem events are neutral in their elemental focus, but most limited time events do tend to favor one particular element over the other. Look to whatever event is currently active to provide you a sense of direction on which mono-element team you should try build first. For example, for the Loyalty's Requiem raid event, the boss is Flame Element, so if you start Dragalia Lost with that event, you're going to want to try build up a water team as a priority. Generally speaking, it's usually worth it to try finish out the rewards from limited time events, at least up to the point where you obtain any precious items from them that are limited to one or a few copies. Raid events and other events with co-op also provide a good sync for Gatherwings, which stay tough to burn even as you approach the mid-game. At this point of the game, there's just so many methods for incremental gains that as long as you keep playing, it's hard to go wrong. The more you play, the more Wormite you'll collect, the more Eldwater you'll get, and eventually you'll start to be able to buy Wormprints from the shop, unlock mana spirals, and hit the level cap on your various facilities. If you're willing to put in more time up front, getting your stamina and Gatherwings to the point where they regenerate naturally is a good place to be. At that point, you should have access to 240 stamina and 24 Gatherwings to spend every day if you're managing cooldowns. Daily bonuses cost 85 stamina for Avenues, Elemental Ruins, and Dragon Trials, plus 4 wings for IO. So in a typical day, you'll have 20 wings and 155 stamina free to work with, some of which will go toward whatever limited time event is currently active, be that a raid like Loyalty's Requiem or the Fire Emblem event that's happening right now. The remaining resources can be spent in void battles or IO, or farming up a quest which happens to be on double drops or triple drops at the time, especially if that quest has a material that's bottlenecking your next character build or weapon project. Once you find yourself in this routine, it's safe to say you've arrived through the early game and into the mid-game of Dragalia Lost. Relax with some stories to earn Wormites, play around with your Halidom layout, and keep on building. There's still lots more you can do, but you're no longer flooded with stamina and wings from level ups, meaning there's more time for a break or breather here and there as you play. Many players enjoy Dragalia in this state of play perpetually and wait around for new events or story content to release so they can check it out. At this level of progress, it's likely you'll be totally fine for whatever comes your way. However, some players prefer more of a challenge, and this is where Dragalia's final few quests come into the fold. So, to close out this video, let's briefly touch on endgame content. Step 10, challenge High Dragon Trials and the Agito Uprising. When you've done everything else in Dragalia Lost, there's 2 sets of endgame battles for you to take on that'll push your abilities to the limit. Both sets of fights have weekly rewards up to 3 times per week, so if you're interested in taking these on, it's good to get started relatively early to begin building up a stockpile of materials from them. High dragons drop orbs, tails, and horns used to trade for copies of that dragon, a Fafnir facility, and to craft high dragon weapons, which are stronger than Chimera tech weapons when upgraded to tier 2. Agito bosses drop silver and gold masks used to trade for elemental tree facilities and craft 6-star Agito weapons, which also have a higher ceiling than Chimera tech weapons do. High Dragon Trials consist of fights against souped up versions of the story Great Worms and range in difficulty from Prelude to Master. The Prelude fights require 11,000 might to unlock, and by Master difficulty, 24,000 might is needed to get started. Your first clears on Standard and Expert difficulty can be done at any time, typically even if you die during the quest, because the Mentor bonus system means stronger players have an incentive to carry you and clear the quest to obtain Wormite. Since I didn't want to rely on gacha summons, this was actually part of my strategy in my free-to-play alt, and it's how I obtained a copy of every High Dragon on my first day playing Dragalia Lost without relying on Discord or any other outside assistance. Subsequent clears are going to be harder because you'll have to do more to carry your own weight. In general, a character at 45 to 70 mana nodes, at max level, with a 4-star fully unbound dragon and a few level 16 facilities, with a Chimera Tech weapon, is a pretty good place to be for Standard and may be sufficient for some expert trials. You're typically going to want to do co-op for High Dragons, and it does take a while to learn their patterns, so don't get frustrated if you have to use a revive here or there to get by. The Agito Uprising is the other set of endgame fights. These are a bit easier than Expert High Dragons on their standard difficulty. The Expert Agito fights are arguably on par with the Master High Dragons. Kayan is the easiest Agito fight, and your Chimera Tech Cleo or Alex can likely clear him on standard difficulty. You can use his drops to craft your very first 6-star Shadow Agito weapon, which can then help you clear Kayan on Expert. Volk and Ciela are slightly harder, since those two fights involve more action elements and maneuvers that will test your reflexes or knowledge of the patterns of each fight. I don't want to get into too much detail on either the High Dragons or Agito Uprising, since we're past the early and mid game at this point. I've uploaded several other videos on the channel to share gameplay footage of those fights, as have other content creators and Dragalia community members, so whenever you're ready to take those on, doing a bit of research beforehand never hurts. These are also the types of content where you can stop by Discord and people will probably try help you with your first clear. Alright, we've covered a ton in this video, from the early game story tutorials to your first steps into the late game. I hope this video helps newer players navigate the variety of content and mini systems in Dragalia Lost, with an emphasis on enabling them to ramp up quickly so that they're able to tackle limited time special events and collect all or most of the good rewards soon after they start playing DL. The TLDR is to clear Chapter 7, craft Manticore weapons, and then craft Chimera Tech weapons. At that point, you should be relatively good to go. If you have any more tips for new players, please leave them in the comments below. There's so much to this game that making a comprehensive guide is almost impossible, but I hope this provides a good starting point if Dragalia Lost has you feeling lost. As always, I'm around this channel's Discord, so stop by if you have any questions as you're on your Dragalia journey. The link to join the server is in the video description below. Otherwise, everyone, that is going to do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, take care, and I'll see you next time.